Hi, this is Dr. Allen. I wanted to cover these slides with you that we used in the last Asbury Live session. Quite a few of you attended. I understand that some of you had technical problems, and so I'll review over the material that we discussed, and this will also benefit those of you that weren't able to join us for that. So one of the first things that we talked about was looking at your next segment of the strategic marketing plan, which is segment 3. And this is all about your promotional strategy, how we're going to communicate with the customer. And so in this, you'll want to make sure that you include these items, and these are all included in the segment clip that you have in terms of the tab for this particular assignment. And so you'll want to choose from the different types of objectives and talk about what is going to be, which objectives you're going to use. You may have more than one, and you can see these in the textbooks in terms of the different types of objectives. And then the promotional tools. And that is, which ones of the promotional tools are you going to use? There happen to be 6 of those as well. And you'll want to explain why this is the right mix. Now, I have mandated that everybody needs to have advertising in their plan. So I want you to have the experience of talking about your advertising strategy. And within this, you'll discuss the creative theme that you're going to have. And then you'll talk about which media are you going to use, such as TV or radio or print, internet, those kinds of things. And then why are you going to focus on this one or these different ones that you're going to include. And then everyone needs to include one example ad. You don't have to actually create the ad in terms of any kind of storyboard or any sort of graphics, but I want you to describe it in a way that a listener could be able to track what you're saying. And then if you're using some other promotional tools beyond advertising, what specific activities, what tactics are you going to use? You don't need to develop any kind of promotional budget, but you should talk about what approach you're going to take for the promotional budget. And we're going to be discussing those in a moment, and of course that's covered in the textbook as well. So let's get into talking about some of these areas. In the promotion strategy, we're going to talk about what is basically the composition of it, how we go about the process of designing it, some of the objectives that you can have and the different components, and then we'll talk about how you put together a budget. There's several processes that are used commonly for this, and then the specific strategies that you're going to have, and maybe a little bit about how we try to integrate all these together, as well as monitor the effectiveness of it. Now, this is the sort of the strict definition of what we think of as the promotion strategy, and it's all about the planning portion of this, about implementing it, and then having a control process for your communications to your customers. That's really what promotion is all about, is how we're going to communicate to the customers, pardon me, and specifically to our target market. So what are the key pieces of the promotion strategy? Well, we've got several options that we have, and you can think of this as kind of your promotional toolkit in terms of what you use. Advertising, personal selling, both of these you're probably pretty familiar with. Sales promotion, I'm sure you've experienced it, but you may not be as familiar with it by that name. Likewise for direct marketing, which probably all of you have been the object of. And then internet marketing, all the ways that we use social media and the various kind of interactive tools. Public relations is an area you may not have thought of as being part of marketing, but we do consider it to be marketing, and many people refer to it as free advertising as we use the news media to talk about our product and services and the different things that we're doing. So when we're putting together communications objectives, these are going to determine how we're going to use the different components in our marketing program. And so we typically look at one or sometimes more than one of 6 key kinds of objectives that we're looking at here. The most basic one is need recognition, and this is where we're just trying to get people to recognize that they even need to solve the kind of problem that we're trying to solve. One example of this is, if you're comfortable when you go to sleep, you probably don't usually think about the need for a new mattress. And so mattress companies have started reminding us that over the course of several years that our mattress gets full of dust mites, and they might show us these microscopic photographs of these creepy, crawly things that are in our mattress, and that helps us to recognize that we have a need. We also sometimes have an objective of trying to find the buyers, get the buyers to kind of uncover themselves in terms of showing us that they are interested in our product. Brand building is a key part of this, and you'll be thinking about this as you put together your brand strategy for one of your last components of your plan, trying to get people to recognize our brand and to associate certain things with this brand or this personality that we have for our product. Evaluating alternatives can be a big part of advertising. Sometimes we're doing direct comparison to competitors, either named or unnamed as brand X or leading brands, that kind of advertising. And then often we're to the point now where we're trying to get people to actually make the decision to purchase. And then finally, an objective can be to hold on to customers that we already have, to try to keep them continuing to buy from us and rather than buying from one of our competitors. When we put together the budgeting, there's going to be several methods, and you're going to want to choose one of these for your method and be able to explain why you think it's the right approach to setting up your budget. Objective and task is just what it sounds like. It's where we decide what are we trying to accomplish with our promotional budget, with our promotion strategy that we're doing, and then it determines what are the tasks that we're going to have to do and then assigns costs to those tasks. So basically we say here's the job that we have to do and here's what it's going to cost to do it. One of the ways that's very commonly done is the percentage of sales approach. And this is where we look at last year's sales and just say we're going to apply an arbitrary percentage to it, like 5%, for example, and say that's what we're going to spend on advertising. And then we've got another approach that we take, and that's competitive parity. And that's where we're trying to kind of keep up with the Joneses. And so we're going to make sure that, we try to assess what other people are spending that we're competing with and make sure we spend at least that much. And then there's another one that's just all you can afford, which basically says, look, we think advertising is going to be, an important thing for us. And so we basically say, whatever you give me, that's what I'll spend. Now, there's pros and cons to each one of these, and you'll want to read those over in your textbook. But when you think about it, there's pretty inherent kinds of problems with some of these. For example, with the percentage of sales, when you've got a brand new product, you're not going to have anything to apply the percent to because you don't have any past sales to apply to it. The other problem with percent of sales is that we may be at a different stage this year than we were last year. If last year we were introducing a brand new product, then we may have spent a lot of money. Maybe we bought a Super Bowl ad and went with that very high stakes kind of gamble of spending all that money to get exposure to such a large audience. But now this year we've already introduced our product, and so we don't have as much of a need to spend. So we may actually be overspending if we spend as a percent of sales. Likewise, we may have a need to rejuvenate our brand or our product image, and so we may need to spend more than we have in the past. So there's the percent of sales is commonly used, but it's really fraught with problems, and it's a very imprecise way of doing it. Generally, objective and task is considered to be a better approach, but it is a lot more tedious kind of an approach, and one that a lot of marketing organizations aren't willing to go to the trouble to do. Competitive parity is reasonable in that we're sort of at least doing as much as what our competitors are. But what if our competitors are leaving money on the table? They're wasting money doing a lot of kind of vanity sort of ads just to be able to show, for example, that they can play at the Super Bowl too. Well, then you don't really want to copy bad management practices. And then all you can afford is probably the least precise way to approach this. Now, here's a good chart from your textbook that talks about factors that influence the design of the promotion strategy. And so we won't go through all these here, but when we're looking at two big ways that we do promotion, advertising and personal selling, and advertising and sales promotion we'll kind of put together here, you can see, based on these various criteria, which one we'd be more directed to. And this is particularly helpful as you're thinking about whether it's appropriate to have a personal selling component to your strategy. This would be a good thing to consider as you're evaluating whether you want to do this for your strategic plan for either Guardian or for Majestic guitars. So I think these are pretty self-evident, but look over this chart and this will help you in making some of those decisions. Now, when we're setting advertising objectives and we're looking at budgeting, we usually, as we talked about, we have these specific kinds of objectives that we start with, and sometimes we may find that more than one objective is going to be appropriate. Now, we looked at these as, specific kind of promotional objectives before, but these can apply as well specifically to advertising. Remember, promotion is bigger than just advertising because it includes personal selling and sales promotion, direct marketing, that sort of thing. And so you can apply these same things to your same kinds of objectives to your advertising. You'll want to understand these first before you launch into a particular advertising campaign. When you are putting together your budgeting, these, as we talked about, the objective and task is really stronger from a logical standpoint. And so as you're getting into doing all of the details of your advertising, determining your budget, putting together your creative strategy, and you're choosing which media, you're going to make sure that all of these sync up with the objectives that you're trying to accomplish. And so all of these things really need to be well coordinated. We mentioned creative strategy. Remember, this is, you want to read about this in your textbook, but it's part of what it should be driven by your target market that you've chosen and the positioning that you want. And so you always, as we talked about, you always want to go back to the prior decisions that you've made and say, oh, do these new decisions that we've made or that we're making make sense for the choices that we've made before? And so when you're putting together what we talk about, the creative side of your advertising, you want to make sure that there's a good, strong, unifying concept that binds together the different parts of the advertising campaign. For example, if the concept is that we're trying to, be very stylistic in the approach that we take for our promotion, then we'd want to, we might have advertising in print, for example, that has very little copy or words involved in it. And so we'd want to be consistent with that. With the other kinds of advertising that we're doing on the web or in TV or that sort of thing. So we're looking for consistency here. Now, you're not going to get the opportunity to use an advertising agency with your plan that you're doing, but if you were doing marketing, particularly for a large company, there's a very good chance that you would use an agency. So there's a lot of good, strong things that advertising agencies do for you. They can help you in putting together your creative ideas. And then they can help to coordinate everything and to add some discipline to the process. The good thing about ad agencies is that they're doing this kind of thing every day, whereas your company may only be doing an ad campaign periodically. And so you may not have that sort of discipline inside of your organization. And then they can help you to collaborate, where they hopefully can kind of tamp down some of the egos that are sometimes involved in this process. And then they're great for ideas, putting together programs, and they have a lot of good resources that they add to the process. And so they can be very helpful to you, and particularly helpful as you get into deciding about how to use media, particularly when you're getting into new areas that maybe you haven't traditionally been in, like using social media, various kinds of digital advertising. Sales promotion is an area that some of you are going to want to consider as you're putting together your strategy for your plans in this class. And so we want to understand what some of the different types are. One of the ones that are frequently used are purchase rebates. These are very popular, and I'm sure you've probably filled out forms and filled out rebates. And it's kind of interesting when you think about sales promotion is that it actually kind of gets into some other areas of the process. Very often our promotion that we do is linked very closely with our advertising. Think, for example, an advertisement that you see in a magazine that has a coupon at the bottom of the advertisement. Well, the coupon is sales promotion, but the advertisement is a more traditional kind of advertising. Merchandising, what you're doing through your intermediaries, like with retailers. They obviously have an interface with the use of coupons or other sorts of promotion that may be done, some sales promotion that may be directed directly toward the retailer, where you give them a special kind of extra piece of profit if they promote your product inside the store through special signage or through putting something. You may cooperate with the advertising that they do in their flyers, for example, where they might include some kind of coupons in there. And then we also might link this together with things that we're doing with planning our products or through our sales. Now, some of the other kinds of sales promotion that we have are like trade shows, where people go to a place. You've probably been to a home show or a home and garden show, and that's considered sales promotion. Specialty advertising might be advertising that shows up in an airport, for example, or on the back of a park bench. You've entered contests before. Point of purchase displays that we do at a store are considered sales promotion. And then we mentioned coupons. Recognition programs like your Kroger card, for example, or various things like that might fit into that category. And then free samples that you get in the mail or free samples that you pick up as you walk around Costco could be a form of sales promotion. So here's a chart that we won't belabor here on the recording here, but I want you to make sure that you look at it in your text to understand how we target different sales promotion to different groups. Sometimes a lot of the promotion we do is toward consumers, but we may also give special promotions to our partners in the value chain, like wholesalers, or to salespeople, where we encourage them to push our product. Some of the advantages of sales promotion is that it can be very flexible and very targeted. We can decide who we want to promote to if we're trying to get the value chain members, for example, the retailers, to really push our product. We can target it directly at them, unlike advertising that's just sort of blasted out to everybody. And then a nice thing about sales promotion is you usually get more direct feedback. There's more of a closed loop. So when somebody uses a coupon, for example, we know that that has been effective, at least to some degree. There are limitations, though, we shouldn't think of it as something that we substitute for advertising and for personal selling, although sometimes we may choose to emphasize these kinds of promotional sales promotion efforts. But it usually should work in concert with these other promotional tools that we have. And then it's real important to make sure that we have some control mechanisms so people don't, take advantage in a negative way in terms of coupons or contests or these kinds of things. And we need to make sure that we're monitoring these and that we still consider it to be a good investment as we're doing certain things like price incentives. And often sales promotion, it really isn't always reusable. Sometimes it is, but it's usually targeted at a specific kind of an approach. So then just in wrapping up here, when we're looking at our sales promotion strategy, we want to make sure that we're defining the particular task that we're trying to accomplish and make sure that the sales promotion program that we're using is appropriate for the task that we're trying to accomplish. We should have objectives for any kind of promotion that we're using, whether it's sales promotion or any other kind of promotion. And then we want to make sure that we're continuing to evaluate it as we're using it and try to make sure that it's understandable. Well, hopefully that was helpful to you. If you have any questions about this as you listen to and watch these slides or read in the text, please drop me an email and I'll be glad to try to clear anything up. Thanks.